All right, the sun is out, and so are we. It's Monday morning right here, and of course, we're out here looking for, should I say, daily 2K? Maybe I should put a currency in front of that. Dollars, definitely, not in this economy. But yes, it's Follow the Money with Ugo Dre right here on Classic FM. I am Joanna Mustafa, sitting in for him. And this is brought to you by Nairametrics in partnership with UBA. It's going to be, as always, we cover where the money is going, especially on the equities markets. And maybe we may come around to talk about what's happening on the fixed income side of things. But yes, it was a great week last week. We're going to go through the weekly wrap-up and, of course, some of the corporate news that drove the market, some of the big stories on the markets last week, like Oando being suspended, and then some of the earning results as well that came out. Transcorp Hotel came out, UBA came out, and I think over the weekend, Dangote and Airtel came out. So definitely news that will shake up the markets a little bit. But this last week that ended October, was it 18th? No, it wasn't 18th. It was October 20-something. That week, of course, was one of, would I say, a ceiling-breaking week. I don't recall a week as strong as last week in H2 2024. We haven't recorded a full week as far as what I've been recording. We haven't recorded a full week with every day staying consistently in the green. The bears were nowhere to be found. And by that, I mean, no day in the red. Even Iredale attempted a rebound this week. The market gained 1.41%. And again, like I did say, a ceiling-breaking week. We did break the 60 trillion mark. In fact, we spent 2 consecutive days above 60 trillion when it comes to market capitalization. We went from 59.43 trillion at the beginning of the week, and I think by the end of the week, we're about 60.261 trillion. Market capitalization. Another ceiling that was broken was all share index when it comes to the points. We did rise above the 99,000 ceiling. We started at 98,070.28 and we wrapped up the week at 99,448.91 points. Of course, some will say it was inevitable, but for several weeks it has been inevitable, and then something comes and drags the market down. So yes, we did do that last week. A couple of stocks also rejoined the SWOTs category. The stocks worth over $1 trillion naira. FBN Holdings was one of them. Oando was one of them. And Transcorp Hotel was the final that rejoined the SWOTs category. Of course, we know that these stocks are not new to that category. They've been in and out. What we want to see is them cement their place in that category. But yes, all in all, this week recorded, positive, the trading week, a rally, especially in banking stocks. We saw, I think it was on Thursday, there was just that huge rally within the banking index. Insurance and oil and gas stocks as well. Oil and gas seems to be a consistent one with that, and this was all despite profit taking in the consumer goods sector. The market recorded 58 equities stocks that appreciated in price during the week, and about 30. I think the previous week was at 33. So you can see the difference in how strong a week we did have. And then there were 18 equities that depreciated in price as opposed to the previous week where we had 43. So you can see that huge difference. All indices finished the review week higher, aside from consumer goods, which was down 0.84%, and the NGX Lotus, that's the index that tracks the performance of Sharia compliant equities. NGX Lotus, that was down 1.19%, but everything else was in the green. Questions are, will profit taking persist this week? Will we see more buying interest intensify? In what direction will some of the latest earning release drive or direct investors? That's something we hope to see. But year-to-date performance, we're at 33%, so that's slightly above inflation, 30 basis points above inflation. Definitely good news. When it comes to corporate announcements, UBA, they announced their audited results for the third quarter that ended 30th of September 2024, and strong and impressive growth across all key indicators. If we're coming to net interest income, we're seeing that rose impressively by 149% to 1.103 trillion in the period under consideration, and we're also seeing a 20.2% increase in profit before tax. So they closed at about 603.48 billion when you compare that to the 502.09 billion recorded in the third quarter of 2023. Also, profit after tax also rose significantly or remarkably by 16.9%. And of course, we did see that rally on UBA stocks during the week. As well, Airtel Africa, their financial statements for half year ending 30th of September came out, I think, over the weekend or so. They recorded a profit after tax of 79 million at the end of the first half of their financial year that ended September 2024. And just to take you back a bit, UBA, by the way, they're gearing up for their capital raise in a few weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how their results drive interest and all of that. We await more details. Back to Airtel Africa, they reduced their exposure to foreign currency. That improved the company's performance in the period. Airtel Africa said its regulatory filing that 89% of its operating company's debt is now local. So that's I think that would be a sigh of relief for investors and the company itself. Airtel Africa's revenue also fell to $2.37 billion for March to September due to currency devaluation. That's the story of quite a number within that sector, telcos, and they're working their way to reduce their FX exposure with all the volatility that we've seen of late. But they've also, customer base has increased by 6.1% to 156.6 million. So, it's left with investors. We'll see how they move, according to what they've seen from Airtel Africa. We know that it's a huge one. I think it's one of the most expensive stocks that on the NGX, one of the most capitalized stocks on the NGX. Let me be safe and say that. So if anything happens to it this week, it definitely will affect the floor, and hopefully we don't slip, below the ceilings that we've broken last week. But yes, that's their results. Coming to Orlando, they have also released a new date for publication of their financial statements. So I think it was a week before, they said they were going to release their audited financial statements on Wednesday, 23rd, right? And this has been a long time coming. We haven't seen an audited financial statement from them in, I think, about 2 years. And they did not meet up with that deadline again. It's not the first time that they're giving out a date and not meeting up with the deadline. They didn't meet up again, but they're coming out now to say that this Friday, November 1st, they will be dropping that financial statement. Of course, they were suspended as a result on the NGX from trading that stock. You can't trade it on that stock. Now, the NGX Reg did suspend them until they release their audited financials. So, that's what's happening now. And hopefully they're able to meet up with their 1st of November deadline. And it's not the first time this is happening. In JSC as well, on Johannesburg Stock Exchange, we know earlier in the year, the same thing happened. They were suspended for not, being able to submit financials. So, we'll see how sentiments move. But interesting enough, before its suspension, it did rally significantly. In fact, it was one of the stocks that buoyed the exchange during the week. But, so, we'll see what happens. That's all I'll keep saying. 1st of November is the date that they have said that they'll be releasing their audited financials. They did mention that the delay was due to materiality of its recently completed acquisition. To quote what was said, we hereby regret to notify the public of a 7-day delay. We wish to further provide an update that the audit committee and company's board have convened as scheduled to review and approve the 2023 audited financial statement and have provisionally approved the financials presented subject to its issuance of the auditor's opinion. So Friday is the day. We'll see what happens. They said their auditors requested additional time to finalize their audit's opinion which now includes, of course, evaluating the impact of the acquisition. We know the Agip acquisition, may affect their books one way or the other. But again, 1st of November is the day. As of now, no trading on that stock until they submit their financials. Dangote Cement, they have also dropped results. And again, it's one of those heavy stocks. It's a stock worth over $1 trillion. It will be interesting to see how, I think it dropped over the weekend. It will be interesting to see how investors move this week, whether or not that affects anything. But marginally increased their 9-month pre-tax profit to 406.38 trillion. And this is according to the company's unaudited financial statements for the period between January and September. Revenues increased by 69.5% from 1.51 trillion in the first 9 months of 2023 to 2.56 trillion in the period under the review. So yes, despite the 70% increase in revenues, the company only manages to increase profit after tax by it's not even up to 1%. It's just over 0.5%, 56 basis points. And of course, that's owing to a near doubling in production costs and more than 100% increase in finance cost. So yes, Airtel, Dangote, their results have dropped, both heavy hitters. We'll see how the floor reacts. Finally, before we go on a break, Nigeria is considering U.S. diaspora bond as CBN targets $1 billion monthly remittance. They're contemplating the issuance of a diaspora bond in the United States next year. We know that earlier in the year they did a domestic dollar-denominated bond, and the results were quite impressive. So now they're planning the issuance of a diaspora bond in the United States next year. They're aiming to secure monthly remittance inflow of $1 billion. This is according to, I won't say Cardi B, but yes, Central Bank Governor Olayemi Cardoso. He in an interview conducted during the, IMF and World Bank meeting in Washington, D.C., he highlighted the growing investment appetite among Nigerians living abroad who have doubled their remittance contributions since the current administration initiated significant reforms last year. So, we'll see how that pans out. They're saying it's scheduled for next year, and we'll also see what diaspora appetite is like and how they respond to that bond. But that's your weekly wrap up for some of the big investment news, especially on the NGX. Last week, when we return, we'll be speaking with Adebayo Adebanjo, Senior Analyst, Research and Strategy at Cardinal Stone Securities. Stay with us. This is Follow the Money with Ugo Dre, brought to you by Nairametrics in partnership with UBA.
Are still the one to beat. Still got to beat Nigerian stocks. Happy to invest in the economy.
Really understand the difference between band A and B and C and D and all that stuff.
Are you interested in the heartbeat of Nigeria's economy? Join us every Monday morning on Classic 97.3 FM from 8 to 8:30 a.m. on Follow the Money with Ugo Dre as he delves into the dynamic world of finance, offering insight, analysis, and expert commentary on the latest trends shaping the Nigerian economy, or catch up on your favorite podcast platform. Follow the Money with Ugo Dre is brought to you by Nairametrics, creating wealth through information.
You are now listening to Follow the Money with Ugo Dre in partnership with United Bank for Africa.
Yes, Follow the Money with Ugo Dre is what we are about, at least for the next about 15 minutes here. I am Joanna Mustafa, and of course, we are talking about some of the, big stories for last week that happened within the investment space, specifically the NGX, and of course, what we can anticipate for the week. This is brought to you by Nairametrics in partnership with UBA. Right now, we have Adebayo Adebanjo, Senior Analyst, Research and Strategy from Cardinal Stone Securities. Good morning, Adebayo.
Morning.
Yeah, I guess traffic.
To be here.
Yeah, I guess traffic has you held up on Monday morning. Typical. But let's it doesn't stop you from sharing with us some of the insights that happened last week. Let's begin with, it was a ceiling breaking week. We're seeing renewed buy interest. What are your thoughts on some of the things that did happen last week with the renewed buy interest, and of course some of the ceilings we broke when it comes to all share index and market cap? Do you see us continuing with that rally this week, or do you think some of the earnings that we have seen, Dangote, say Airtel might drag the markets down. All right. Hopefully network allows us to have...
Yes.
All right. Do you hear me?
Yes, I heard you.
All right,
I said it's a bit nuanced. It's difficult to say in terms of, how, we expect markets to go this week. A lot of people have been asking questions about, RRL, right? I saw RRL kind of rebound at the later end of last week. And this is not a surprise to me because really what has been driving the sell down in RRL for the most part of last week and the week before was really, investors who had positioned on the NASD market. So a lot of people had bought, RRL on the NASD prior to it listing on the NGX. And so it just kind of made sense that, profit-taking activities would ensue, in the NGX upon listing. In addition to, to that, there's also a lot of slowdown as regards, RRL taking up the SPDC onshore and shallow water assets via the Renaissance Consortium. So that's kind of been held back. If you recall, there's been some news article about, the upstream regulator kind of putting a bit of slowdown on that. And I think that kind of fed bearish sentiment, into the market as well. But of course, like I always say, RRL remains a very good buy. I mean, we've seen that a lot of market participants tend to pair them alongside Seplat. Mm-hmm. And because RRL is a dollar-generating company, like Seplat, has strong earnings, and because it's also one of the probably the only refiner on the index right now, I think a lot of investors are looking to position in that stock eventually. So I think that's what is kind of driving the recovery that we're seeing, in that stock for this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see you draw that comparison between, RRL and Seplat. Share price is still far way apart. What do you see? Obviously last week we saw, I think it was just one day of rebound. What do you see driving a rally and perhaps driving the share price of RRL up to, really compete with the likes of a Seplat that is now heading towards 6,000?
Well, it's tough to compare them, truly speaking, and the reason is not too far-fetched. Seplat is a bigger company, by all standards. And when you look at, the things we use to measure oil and gas companies, mostly we use the 2P reserves, that's the proven and probable reserves. So as of the beginning of this year, Seplat had about over 490 million barrels of oil equivalents as of the beginning of the year in proven reserves. RRL just has about 119 million barrels of oil equivalents. Right? So you see that the stack comparison there puts Seplat as a bigger company in just proven reserves. And of course, as you are aware, Seplat's transaction on the MPNU just got concluded as of last week, and I think that's what has been driving the positive sentiment in that stock, really. But really, what I expect for RRL, right, is that fundamentals are going to be back in play. The sell-off, like I already explained before, was because, a lot of investors are positioned on the NASD. In fact, a major investor in RRL, that's the African Capital Alliance Fund, offloaded over 25 million units of its shares in the first week of its listing. So that kind of brought, a lot of sell pressure. So even a lot of investors who did not know what was going on just figured, this stock is going down, we can exit. So that's pretty much what drove that, bearish sentiment. So again, fundamentals are going to be back in play. When you look at just H1 performance, we've not seen Q3 numbers of any of these players, but on H1 performance basis, in dollar terms, RRL reported stronger numbers than Seplat. Although, the reasons for that are very nuanced. It's not one for one. Right? It's not that, maybe, RRL generated a stronger revenue than Seplat. But when you look at all the deductions from cost pressures, from tax, all those differences, have allowed RRL to report a better H1 number in profit after tax, relative to Seplat. So all those things are things that will eventually come to the fore, for the company in terms of analyzing it. So we think that when we see Q3 numbers, 9 months numbers, that will give even further, kind of
a catalyst, right?
Making. Yeah, exactly. To give further decision making as to whether RRL remains a good buy, and I am very, very optimistic about their potentials.
Okay, we know that we have seen quite a bit of volatility in Nigeria's energy sector, regulators, and all of that. How is RRL going to steer through all of that? What partnerships are ahead that perhaps could position it better?
Yes, so as you know, international oil companies have been exiting our markets because of, their new sustainability drive, so to speak. And so I think that kind of creates an ample opportunity for indigenous oil companies in order to take up, these reserves. And it's very, very important because, Nigeria has a target of about 1.7 million barrels per day, in production. So somebody has to pick up these assets to utilize them in order to, further aid that, our production targets. And that's what we're seeing indigenous oil companies like RDL do. So basically, strategic partnership like the Renaissance Energy Africa Alliance, which, RDL is a major part of, has sought to take up, SPDC's onshore and shallow water, assets. RDL is only just took up the Olo and Olo West assets from Total as well. So these are some of the transactions that are going on, within our market, showing that, indigenous oil and gas players are showing capacity to take up all these assets that have been left off by international oil companies, so that Nigeria can maintain its oil output, production. So I think that the biggest impediments to the success of these transactions are regulatory slowdowns. You know how long it took, Seplat to take up MPNU's assets, just recently got concluded. Transaction that started since 2021. Also, there's a lot of, back and forth with RDL and the upstream regulator, that's the NUPRC, on these Seplat, on these SPDC assets, right? So these regulatory slowdowns are the biggest challenges that we have, and we think, the companies' ability to navigate, these challenges will go a long way, in how soon they can close the transaction.
All right, we'll see how they're able to navigate that. I mean, you've made reference to one of his competitors, Seplat. The other one would be Owando as well. Interesting activities on Owando this week. It was suspended, and I mean, they've said that they're going to release their audited financials by the end of this new week, November 1st. What are your thoughts on what's happening there and how, investors are receiving that suspension and the stock in general?
Yeah, so to be honest, and this is just my own personal view, really, I'm very, very concerned about, Owando's corporate governance, as a whole. It is very, very concerning for investors. And that's just even on a sentiment basis. When you now look at their performance as well, this company has reported negative equity for the longest time. Yes, we're excited about the transaction that, that it has been able to close. Ajib's assets, which are really, really good. Ajib's assets kind of set Owando to be the biggest, oil and gas indigenous upstream oil and gas company in Nigeria, even bigger than Seplat with MPNU, based on proven reserves. So yeah, it's going to be a much bigger company by extension based on that transaction. But, if the company is not able to manage these things effectively, it would not matter. And those are the problems, I mean, it has gotten to a point where they have to suspend, trading on that stock just because of these same corporate governance, issues. So I think the company's ability to actually, improve, that's the word I would use, to improve on these, corporate governance issues would go a long way, to kind of, spur, investor sentiment. At the moment, it's pretty much just based on the transaction. Everybody just trying to take position based on the transaction. But eventually, if the company doesn't manage those assets well, if its corporate governance does not improve, it will not matter. And, investors will begin to run away from that stock. Yeah.
I mean, those are the things that matter long term. Finally, before I let you go, well, maybe not quite finally, banking, the banking sector, we know that they saw, massive activity this week, especially on Thursday. What do you think is driving that there? And, do you see that spilling over into this week?
Well, honestly, because banks are some of the most liquid stocks on the market, it's always very, very difficult to pinpoint what could be the major driver. There are multiple reasons why somebody could be buying or somebody could be selling them, right? So I think that Q3 numbers are the most imminent data points as far as banking stocks, are concerned, even though, they just dropped their audited H1 numbers just a couple of weeks ago. So the interval is quite, still a bit longer before we see Q3 numbers. But I think that, if we look at the kind of dividends that have been declared so far by most tier one players, I think that investors are beginning to be more excited about banking stocks. But I think as far as sentiment in recent time, very, very difficult to pinpoint. But I would say that I think there's a lot of optimism as regards what Q3 numbers will be, and by extension full year numbers, and what the impact of that would have on the interim dividend ahead of next year.
Interesting things to follow, especially this week. Finally, And this is just, seeing, perhaps gauging where you think the markets will go this week. Are we going to, do you see us staying above 60 trillion this week? Do you see us staying above 99 and perhaps even crossing into the 100,000 all-share index points?
Honestly, like my former boss used to say where I work, he said, if you could tell where the market will go this week or tomorrow, we wouldn't be doing this job.
Right.
But really, on balance of all these factors that I have looked at, I think that sentiments will continue for part of this week. I expect that fundamentals are back in play, and a lot more questions will be asked about the fundamentals of the company ahead of Q3 numbers. So that might actually drive a lot of sentiment. For banks, like I said, tough to say. Banks have a very, very bad reputation of going up today and coming back down tomorrow, right? So it's not going to be a surprise to see some profit taking ensue, this week off the back of that rally. Because remember, some investors have already been down, for the longest time. So now that they are close to their weighted average costs, they might want to take profit and exit entirely. So it's really hard to pinpoint. But whether the market will go over 100,000 index points, it's difficult to say. I will not be able to say, for certain. But we'll see how all these factors, interplay and how it affects, the market.
And I guess our eyes specifically on the oil and gas sector and banking sector for that.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Adebayo Adebanjo, Senior Analyst of Traffic Soon. All right, and that's it today. You can follow them. This show has in partnership with UBA. We'll catch you up on this episode and on with Ugo Dre. From me, Joanna Mustafa, have a profitable week ahead.
All right, family, let's take a moment to relive the magic moments of last Christmas.